Video presentation, my topic was Edmund Burke. Who is Edmund Burke? Edmund Burke was an Anglo-Irish statesman and philosopher. He was born in Dublin and served in Parliament from 1766 and 1794 in the House of Commons. Edmund Burke was part of the Whig Party, and he really stressed the importance of religious institutions and the stability of the country and state. We'll see this pop up a lot when he's discussing the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and really how to preserve a state. Edmund Burke really believed the colonists deserved rights, the American colonists deserved rights, but he didn't like how they gained their independence, and he really critiqued the idea of a revolution. He thoroughly criticized the French Revolution up until the point he died, and he really disagreed with it, and he died in 1797. Edmund Burke's ideas. Burke believed that life starts in the little platoons, family, church, and local community that oriented men towards virtues such as temperance and fortitude. It is in the local in particular that we are able to live justly. He really believed that small communities, like your family and churches and neighborhoods, give us our virtues that we need in our lives and really help us become better people. And just like common day conservatives, he really believes that's how you start a community, is with your families and your churches, and it's not the state imposing its will or handing out something. It's your communities helping each other. Burke also believed that men are born constrained by the traditions of their forebears. Ill-considered reforms that stem from abstract designs are dangerous. He really honed in on the idea of tradition, and tradition was very important to him. And his idea of tradition was not the definition of tradition where you do what your fathers did or your grandfathers did. It's looking at what they did and choosing, if they did it right, then choosing to follow that. But if they did something wrong, then not. It's not just blindly following what they did, but it's looking at the past and then choosing how to lead your life by example. And that was really important to him. And he believed that quick reforms from just abstract designs are dangerous and can hurt society. He also believed that the ties of family and neighborhood are more natural than abstract schemes. He believed that your family and your neighborhood and even the property that you work on it is a lot more important than just this constant seeking of a utopia. Edmund Burke and the American colonies. Edmund Burke had a big problem with the treatment of American colonies. He was frustrated with Britain's Stamp Act, and he thought Britain's policy was imprudent and inconsistent and believed they needed to address the issue with policies. Edmund Burke was very big on the virtue of prudence, something that's really lost in today's generation. He believed that prudence was a virtue and that we as a country need to be prudent in our decision-making and our policies. It's what makes a good country. We can't just have rapid change, because rapid change can lead to the destruction of a state, as we see with revolutions. He believed that Britain's policy with the Stamp Act was imprudent. He believed it was too fast, there wasn't thinking, wasn't rational, and they need to sit down and address it with policies. He believed the government should be cooperative, and in doing so, develop policies to help the colonies, to really work it out. He also believed that the money gained from the colonies was greater than simply putting them in their place. He believed that the Britons could make a lot more money from the colonies than going to war with them or fighting them or wiping them out. Burke then laid out 4 reasons against force to Parliament, and he also believed that the British should avoid war with the colonies because of the spirit of the American people. He said that, quote, "In this character of Americans, a love of freedom is the predominating feature which marks and distinguishes the whole." He understood the love of freedom and the passion for it, which we see now in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, that would negatively hurt the British. He could see them losing the war, which they did. If we look at Burke's 4 reasons against force that he laid out to Parliament, firstly, he believed that the use of force would have to be temporary, and that the uprisings and objections to British governments in colonial America would not be. He knew that you could send troops in and they could fight and it'd be temporary, but the uprisings and the objections you'd see just in Britain itself would not be temporary, and we could see a French Revolution happen, like we did in France. Secondly, Burke believed that he wasn't sure whether Britain could win the war with the American colonies. After Britain just got out of wars and having a low treasury, and the reason why they imposed stamp acts and all these taxes, Burke didn't believe Britain could win. He thought it'd be too costly. If they could win, it would be too costly. They wouldn't have enough money. Thirdly, Burke believed that his scorched earth policy wouldn't help the British. That was something they were thinking about, is just wiping them all out and destroying the land. but he knew that by damaging the land in conflict, it wouldn't be any help or use to the Britons. He understood that the colonists could always escape to the mountains and use guerrilla warfare, and conflict wouldn't serve in Britain's best interests. He knew that they couldn't work the land then, so there was no point. Burke firmly believed that it was dangerous for Britain to attack because of the lack of experience in this department. The British had never attempted to reign an unruly colony by force, and they didn't even know if it could be done, especially with how far they were. It was just too dangerous of something to try. Burke had 6 proposals that he proposed to Parliament to settle the American conflict. Number 1 was allow the American colonists to elect their own representatives, settling the dispute about taxation without representation. Number 2 was acknowledge this wrongdoing and apologize for it. Number 3 was create a effective manner of choosing and sending these delegates to try to work something out. Number 4 was set up a General Assembly in America itself with powers to regulate taxes. Number 5 was stop gathering taxes by imposition and start gathering them only when they are needed. And number 6 is grant needed aid to the colonies, so they had help. They weren't just paying all their money in taxes and nothing for their families. Burke had a lot of ideas on the rights of man, and something he really fought against Paine about in their papers. He believed that man had the rights to the fruit of their industry and to the means of making their industry fruitful. He understood that those who worked and owned a business deserved the fruits of their labor and had the rights to do what they could to improve that business. He didn't believe he had the rights to take away what they got and what they created. He also said that whatever man can separately do without trespassing upon others, he had a right to do for himself. He believed that as long as your rights didn't take away someone else's, then you're free to do it. He also believed that the purpose of government are specific by the natural wants of men, understood not as their desires, but as their real needs. Burke knew that we are sinful by nature, and we lust after our sinful desires, because we are sinful beings. But the government's job is not to fulfill those who fulfill those natural wants, like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So he knew that the government's job was not to provide us the means to fulfill these sinful desires, but to provide us the wants of men, which are freedom of speech, freedom of religion, what we see now in our Constitution. It's what we long, but it's not what we desire. It's not the sinful desires. Burke had plenty of opinions on government, and he was an aristocrat at heart, and his view of democracy really reflected this. Burke believed that pure democracy, as we saw in Greece, could be important in a time and place, but as now he didn't see it fit in our government. He believed that people had a role in the government, believed only a fairly well-educated people should have a role in the top of our government as an aristocrat. He understood the threat to society when a mass of regular people rose up with mob mentality, and he knew that in government, the common people would be too easily swayed or be blinded by ignorance, and we see that in the French Revolution. He knew that mob mentality was real, and that if somebody could convince them about something, that they would do it. He made very strongly the point that people should act as they were the entire masters. He believed this would be he knew this would be dangerous to society, and that if they acted like the entire masters. And he believed that's why the importance of religion in the state is necessary. He knew to have that overarching hierarchy of a religion, of a God watching you, and you being judged when you die. He knew that would keep people in check. That's what make you strive to be better. That's where you get your virtues and your morals. He knew that the point that people should act as they were their entire masters was wrong, because you shouldn't act like you are your entire master. You should know that you are always on jurisdiction of your God. Burke and God, that was a big part in his philosophy, was religion. And he believed that God played an extremely big part in state and society. He believed that religion is what connects us as a community and gives us our morals and values that help us mute the sinful desires of man. He knew that without religion, without God, we are just sinful people by nature, and the state can crumble. His opponent, Paine, who they both wrote papers back and forth, believed that once God gave man his God-given rights, then God was done interfering with man, that God stepped out of it. He was done. But Burke just didn't believe that God just disappeared into the background like that. He believed that at the end, each person is accountable to him in his judgment. Burke knew there couldn't be any secular societies because this is not a secular world, and that was very important to them. He also believed in a religious society so we can perfect ourselves, and that's the only way to perfect ourselves. Burke and the French Revolution. Burke was in England when the French Revolution started, and the people of England welcomed it. He was really worried by that. The revolution, he said, was based on revolutionary concepts of the right of man and popular sovereignty. He knew this was dangerous because democracy in the abstract and the mere rule of numbers was unrestrained and unguided by the responsible leadership of aristocracy. And he was afraid of that. He was worried that when this mob mentality took over, that there would be nothing left of the state. He knew that with the revolution, you have devaluation of tradition and a thoughtless destruction of anything of material or spiritual resources of society. He also brought up examples of the English Constitution and virtues that lie with it. He talked about continued tradition, unorganized growth, and a hierarchy. Burke, in his opinion of revolts, he does understand that some revolts are necessary, but he believes this can't happen at the person's pleasure. He understands that you can't reach a utopia on earth and you shouldn't try to. And he was very strong about this. He thought that revolutions would choose itself, and he knew the French Revolution didn't. In conclusion, Burke was a great politician and thinker. He paved the way for modern-day conservatism in America and championed the virtues needed to protect society. By showing his disgust for the French Revolution, he made it clear his views on revolutions and how they lead to anarchy and the destruction of society. His view on religion is extremely important and something that I believe should be more prevalent in today's society. He was a great thinker, and we should learn from him on how to lead in our societies and preserve them. And this is my sources used. Thank you very much.